I think sometimes people have the idea that you take an antidepressant and you just feel happy, but that's not really how it works, right? So it takes the edge off the feelings so that you can build coping skills and try to figure out how to manage them more effectively. There's this term in psych, neurons that fire together, wire together. And basically what this is that when we run our chemical electrical signals through pathways of neurons, which is in essence what we're doing when we're thinking, those pathways become more and more efficient. And so this is what I was doing without realizing it, is I was driving efficiency into these negative thoughts, and that's why they were continuing and continuing and continuing. I did this without even realizing I was doing it and trapped myself in a hole. And it got bad enough that, it was one of the first times in my life where I not exactly felt suicidal, but felt if this is going to be the way my brain functions, if this is what life feels like, it's not worth it. I'd rather die than feel this way. And so, of course, I'm a psych nurse, so I realized that was also an irrational thought, got some therapy, and went on some medications, took Zoloft for a little while. And then I was able to actually look at the issue and work on it. One of the main ways that I got out of it was
Welcome to the Human Recovery Lab, where science-backed ideas meet real human stories about how life's hardest moments can become our healthiest comebacks.
We're testing out this live thing, and it's so much fun to be here. Thank you all for joining and for making this happen. So Josh, welcome to the Gumcast.
Thank you.
We're going to be diving more into this idea of fighting depression versus dancing with it, which is the title of this podcast today. But first, I always ask the guest about what keeps them going during tough times, because that's the theme of the whole podcast.
Yeah, sure. I think there's a number of things. I'm sure we'll talk about a bunch of them tonight. I think one of the main ones is relationships. Right, the relationships that we have. That can be external relationships, of course, as far as, friendships, family relationships, all of that. Probably also our relationship with ourselves, right? The way we talk to ourselves, the way we consider ourselves, the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves, all of that. So I think, finding good relationships, keeping them strong, focusing on them is a good way to get through tough times.
Awesome, great answer. We're going to be talking a lot about the different facets of depression, the different ways we cope with it. And it's a great conversation that brought us much closer in just preparing for this podcast. But before we get into all of that, why don't we start with a story that can help the audience get to know you more and get to know your relationship about depression and how you got to become the person you are today.
Yeah, so I guess let me start all the way back at the beginning. So I was, as was mentioned in the intro, I'm a California native. I was born in Paradise, California. So it's about 3.5 hours north of here, a little bit north of Chico. Right, actually, unfortunately, where the fires were a couple of years ago up there. So I was born up there, lived my first 8 years of life between different places in California. I was in Southern California for a little while, spent some time here in the Bay Area, of course, up in Northern California as well. And then when I was 8 years old, my family moved to a small island called Saipan. And so this is an island out by Guam. It's sort of between, sort of Japan and Australia. So a long ways out there. It's very small. It's about 8 miles long and 5 miles wide. So very, very small island. Really beautiful place to grow up, of course. I'm the son of a optometrist. My dad is an optometrist. My mom is a registered nurse. She's actually a psychiatric nurse. I am just like her, right? So I followed in her footsteps. And so I got a lot of training in the way that we, as far as medical training, as far as how we, how we think, how we interact with one another. And I grew up super religious as well. My family was Seventh-day Adventist. And so I think one thing for me was that I was actually sort of sheltered from a lot of the uglier parts of humanity. Right? We didn't really deal with that very much. I was also homeschooled until I was 4 years old. And I'm the oldest brother of 6 brothers. And so my life was very much positive. Right? So like my parents were really close with me. My family was really close. From a young age, my parents really got me feeling like I was the oldest brother. I was supposed to take care of my brothers. We're supposed to stay a close family. And I really identified with that, really enjoyed that. So most of my early life was very positive, didn't have a lot of anxiety or negative feelings because there just wasn't a lot of negative stuff to feel bad about. When I was 15, I moved back over here to live with my grandparents and went to high school in Walnut Creek. And started dating girls and started dating, kind of this gamer girl, a friend of mine. We used to just bring our PlayStations home and play PlayStation, hang out. It was really fun. And I remember a particular time, of course you have some positives and negatives in your life, but I remember a particular time while we were out at Leone Meadows. So it was this summer camp, basically. And we're traveling around, we're doing our things, we're playing, sports, hanging out with our friends. And there was this train that would go around the camp. And we got on the train and I was holding her hand. And I just had this feeling like I just wasn't feeling normal that day. And I didn't really know what it was because it wasn't a normal feeling of mine. So I'm holding her hand and I'm just not feeling as connected as I usually do. And my brain started getting kind of freaked out about it. Started thinking, why am I feeling off? Like, what's going on? Like, what's happening? I think if I look back on it now, probably just didn't get enough sleep. Some sort of other thing was making me anxious. Nothing big, right? But my brain at that time was just very worried about it, very focused on it, and getting sort of into these sort of negative thought loops, trying to figure it out. Mm-hmm. So a couple of hours later, I'm walking around and I see one of my guy friends walking down the way. And he was just kind of a suave guy, just always dressed well, always kind of walked with swagger in his step. And I, at that time, had sort of probably a almost jealous thought of like, oh, I'd like to be like that. Right?
Maybe sort of the worst.
Yeah. So sort of like mostly a kind of insecure thought. But just because I was already trying to figure out why am I not feeling connected to my girlfriend, those thoughts kind of came together, and I had this immediate freak out of like, wait, am I gay? Right? Is this the reason that I'm not feeling connected to my girlfriend? Right? And I think if I had that thought today, it wouldn't be the same. But back then, I'm like this extremely religious 16, 17-year-old kid. And so in the Seventh-day Adventist religion, it's not okay to be gay, right? And so automatically had all of these fears of, well, what's going to happen to me? I'm going to have to tell my girlfriend. That's going to hurt her feelings, right? My community's not going to accept me. I don't know what my parents are going to think of me. All of these sorts of, freak out feelings. I think
is this all happening in the same day or over like 3 days?
Yeah, very, very quickly. So it happened very fast. Just kind of, I was feeling fine the day before, and then that just shot me off into these sort of negative thoughts. So then for a couple of weeks, actually, that was my primary thought. I was just scared all the time. Didn't want to share it with anybody because didn't want anybody to think weird things of me or anything like that. So just kind of stuck in my head. And I would go to school and I'd kind of get through the day. People would notice I'm feeling off, but I wouldn't say anything. And then I'd get home and I'd just go lay in my bed and just try to go to sleep because I just couldn't handle the intense anxiety. And I talked to a couple of people, didn't really help. I was still in this basic panic attack for a couple of weeks. And actually the thing that kind of broke me out of it is I called my dad, talked to my dad, and he said two things. The first thing that he said was, hey, I obviously know you since the moment you were born. And so I hear that you're scared that you're gay, but let me tell you, you're not. Like, I've seen you from the very beginning. That, didn't really come from me that much because I think what I was really worried about is how people would react to me if I was, right? It wasn't so much that I was really thinking that I was. But the second thing that he said really helped. And what he said is, and if you were, your dad or your mom and I would not feel any differently about you. We would love you just the same. We would support you just the same. You're going to find, if you were, you'd find a nice man to be with in the future. You don't have to worry about any of that. We're going to be there for you. We're going to love you no matter what. And that gave me a little bit of hope, took down some of that fear, and started me sort of moving in the right direction. And over the course of a few days, I just sort of felt a little bit better, a little bit better, and eventually kind of broke back out of it and got back to what I might say was my normal self at the time.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. There's a few reflections and a question that comes to mind, but I just think it's crazy how much, especially men, go through an experience like this in various contexts, in various forms, and are not able to find someone, and especially not their dad sometimes, to talk to. And how long we get stuck in these thought patterns about, especially shame around sex and but also career and also swagger, like you mentioned.
Sure.
And the way we're dressed and the way we talk and all these things, especially growing up, is there's very little guidance but a lot of expectation, a lot of like things around you that is telling you how to be a man, rather than helping you explore what kind of man you are. And so and then we isolate, and so it's awesome that you had a dad that was able to kind of get you out of it. And I'm curious to know, so there seems to be, so this was your first depression episode, right? And how long did it last?
Probably about 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay.
Before it started kind of turning around, and then maybe 3 or 4 days of sort of coming out of it. It really felt like a panic attack throughout the entire time.
Okay. Yes. So I know the feeling. The first time I experienced depression was during medical school, and it lasted for a few months because I was not able to talk about it for a long time. And I remember the feeling, or the thing that freaked me out, was that I did not feel like there was a cause to it. Like I couldn't trace it back to a certain scenario like you. So I'm wondering if you had that experience in other types of other episodes.
Yeah, I think maybe in some way. I think there's usually some sort of trigger that starts me freaking out about something. I can relate to it in that, you know, as an older person, as I've learned more and more about just psych in general and more about myself, sometimes I'm very well aware that those freakouts are completely irrational. So, you know, in a way, it's like there's nothing happening other than just something in my brain, right? So it's not like it just randomly happens. There's some thought that does it, but it's not necessarily related to what's actually happening in the world. And then that first situation felt very real, right? If I look back on it now, I realize it was my brain basically having a hardcore anxiety attack, right? But at the time, it felt like that was the real world, right? And so it took some time for me to sort of figure that out.
And was it an instant change when you had that conversation with your dad?
Not instant, no.
Okay.
There was definitely a big weight dropped off of my shoulders. Maybe it was 70% as bad as what it was originally. But it did get better pretty quickly after that. Because again, it was, you know, instead of feeling like it was actually real and it was actually happening, it's like, oh, okay, I'm freaking out. I don't need to be freaking out. And so then the feelings just, you know, gradually came back down pretty quickly.
I also love what your dad told you, that you belong to the family that him and your mom or your family will accept you no matter what. And I think that's kind of the biggest fear, is that depression is just weird. Like we feel weird when we have it, and we feel different, and we feel like we're alone in it. And that, I think, the deeper fear is that we're going to be ostracized, or no one's going to accept us because we're strange.
Yeah.
And so it's really beautiful that he's able to tell you that. I think a lot of people that are in a rut, or like are in a depression, need to hear that sometimes from the people closest to them.
Yeah, I mean, I feel very lucky, right? I'm sure that the reason it was as impactful as it was when he said that is because I knew it to be true, right? He wasn't just saying it. That was my entire experience of him throughout all of my life. And so not everybody gets that. Not everybody has both parents that are constantly supporting you. One of the things that I always appreciated about my parents is they told me I could tell them anything, anytime. Right? No matter what. And they always held to that and always supported. So they wouldn't get mad if I asked them a strange question or I told them about a weird feeling. And so I'm aware as an older person of how lucky I am to have that, right? That's, again, not everybody gets that.
Yeah, and I think but everyone needs that one person. I think we can get through life really well if we have the one person that we can tell anything at any time. And you don't need more than one. Maybe two is great. My dad had a slightly different reaction, even though I was able to go and tell him that. But then he referred me to a psychiatrist immediately. But that was his way of helping. And no offense, but like the psychiatrist wasn't able to help me. And we'll talk more about coping mechanisms, but that was his way of... I wonder sometimes if a sentence like that could have been more powerful than Prozac that I ultimately went on. Yeah. And I'm curious to know if you were able to... Like, what happened with the girl you were dating? Like, were you able to go back and have that conversation with her?
You know, I actually don't remember whether I actually talked to her directly about it. I probably did, knowing myself. And I think I don't know how she felt. Maybe she thought it was a little bit strange or weird, but when I snapped back out of it, I was pretty much back to my normal self, right? And so it didn't cause us any trouble. We continued to date for quite a while, the next couple of years.
So the whole episode was what, like a few weeks?
Yeah, about 2 or 3 weeks.
2 or 3 weeks. Okay. Awesome. Was she able to kind of like understand?
Yeah, as far as I can remember, we had a pretty strong relationship. We had a lot of the same friends. We had a lot of the same, we both liked playing video games, and
sounds like an ideal situation.
It was a great situation. She was super cool. We had a good time in high school. I moved, over to Saipan to go back to nursing school, and so we, eventually separated. But yeah, she was a sweet girl.
I think one of the really interesting things is when we started prepping for this episode, I was just coming out of a pretty deep depression, and you were in a pretty deep depression. And why don't we? I mean, I want to go into more of like the coping mechanisms, like how things have evolved. But I'd love for us to take a quick break first, just in case someone needs to breathe after the story.
Sounds good.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying this episode so far. Be the first to know about new content, events, and our 3-month program by signing up at thehumandash.com/subscribe. And while you're there, you can take the Human Dash assessment. It's free, science-backed, and it shows you how stress and habits are shaping your health right now.
All right, so we covered a lot in the first part, and I think one of the things that I realized about depression is that it doesn't go away. Started off as the enemy that I was trying to crush, and once I crushed it, I thought I won the war, and then it just kept coming back, sometimes even stronger. And what I realized is that even though I really needed someone to help me, especially when I was in my early 20s, when that happened, I quickly needed to kind of find better coping mechanisms to deal with it on my own, because it was very clear that's not going to go away. So why don't we start by you telling us a later episode of depression that happened after that. How old were you in the first time?
I think I was 17.
That's pretty
16,
young.
17.
Wow. It must be pretty jarring.
Yeah.
So, yeah, how did that compare to another episode of depression, if you can share another story?
Sure. Yeah, I've definitely had, quite a few episodes of depression of varying levels over time. I think the next one that really sticks out to me is I had dated my partner for a little while, for a few years, and then we split up for a few years. And so when we got back together, I struggled a lot with some jealous feelings, right? Not that there had been anything done wrong, right? We had been apart, but like I said, I came from a very religious background, became not so religious as an adult, and that transition, I think, was challenging. I had expectations as a younger person that I no longer had as an adult. And so one of the things that happened to me is I started thinking about, when we got back together, I started thinking about the people that she had been with when we had been apart. And those thoughts started to become, very heavy and negative. I think one of the primary reasons that this happened is because I was trying to push them away so hard, right? So I'd have a thought, I'd think of a time, or, I had a time where I was walking down the street of San Francisco, and I saw this very attractive guy walk past me, right? And I had this immediate thought of, I wonder if my partner had been with them or had been with somebody that looked like them. Again, this sort of insecure, jealous thought, right? And at that point, I had been a psych nurse for a little while and had gone through some depression spells and understood that this was an irrational thought. As a younger person, when I would feel jealous, it was like someone was making me jealous. At this point, I knew very much this was in my own head. This was not coming from anywhere. Nobody was doing anything wrong. It's just happening internally. So I'd try to push those feelings away. But when you try not to think about something, that is, in essence, thinking about it. So I would think about it again and again. And the next time I'd see somebody, I'd think the same thought, and I'd get upset with myself for thinking it. And then the next time I'd see a guy, I'd have the same thought, right? And it started becoming so consistent that I just didn't get any breaks from it. So I'd go to bed and I'd sleep and I'd have nightmares about it. And then I'd wake up and the first thought I would have would be this type of thought. And then it would always be sort of running in the background all throughout the day. And that happened for about 3 months, and got to the point where there were months of time where I was just thinking about it constantly. And when you have a thought that long, you start to wonder whether it's ever going to go away. Right? And so we talked prior when we were talking before, there's this term in psych, neurons that fire together, wire together. And basically what this is that when we run our chemical electrical signals through pathways of neurons, which is in essence what we're doing when we're thinking, those pathways become more and more efficient. And so this is what I was doing without realizing it, is I was driving efficiency into these negative thoughts, and that's why they were continuing and continuing and continuing. And so
you're explaining that it's an actual like physical change in
yes.
the neurons, right? It's not just like some hypothetical physiological change. No, it's actually like the myelin sheath around the nerve is getting thicker, which has more conduction.
Yeah, this is the reason that we have that we can learn. This is the reason that we have habits. For example, if you think about, if you've never brushed your teeth before you go to bed, going and brushing your teeth before you go to bed takes some energy, right? It's like not what you're used to. If you do it for a year every single night, actually takes energy not to do it, because you've built this pathway. And so we're all doing this all the time, right? When we think thoughts, if we're consistently thinking the same things, we start to continue to think that. That's what our brain will tend to go to. So again, I did this without even realizing I was doing it, and trapped myself in a hole. And it got bad enough that, it was one of the first times in my life where I not exactly felt suicidal, but felt like, if this is going to be the way my brain functions, if this is what life feels like, it's not worth it. Like, I don't want to feel this way. I'd rather die than feel this way. And so, of course, I'm a psych nurse, so I realized that was also an irrational thought, got some therapy, and went on some medications, took Zoloft for a little while. And for me, Zoloft really, I think sometimes people have the idea that you take an antidepressant and you just feel happy, but that's not really how it works, right? So it takes the edge off the feelings so that you can build coping skills and try to figure out how to manage them more effectively. So that's what it did for me. It took the edge off, and then I was able to actually look at the issue and work on it. And I think this is where, meditation at the beginning, the welcome to the party came in, because one of the main ways that I got out of it was, I'd be walking down the street and I'd see somebody, I'd have that thought again. And then instead of saying, what's wrong with me, and fighting against it, I would say, oh, okay, I guess I'm going to feel like that right now. The first few times I said that did not feel real, right? Very much a fake it till you make it sort of situation. But the more I said it, the more I did it. Sometimes I'd just have to do it every 15 seconds over and over and over. It became more and more real. And eventually I remember having this moment where the thought came up and I realized I hadn't thought about it in 5 minutes. And that was the first time where I was, I'm going back in the right direction. I'm going to be okay. And just that little bit of hope really motivated me to keep driving forward. And a couple of months later, it was a very rare thought at that point, but definitely took practice, again, running those neural pathways, reframing how I was looking at the situation.
And how long did you stay on Zoloft?
Probably about 5 or 6 months, I think. Just, while I was building up my ability to manage the feelings myself, and also sort of, I think, building some good habits that would support me in having good brain health so that I wouldn't revert back into it. And then once I really felt that those were stabilized and good, I went off the Zoloft. Never really wanted to be on meds long term, so went off the Zoloft and then kept on practicing those things to try to keep myself, happy and okay.
I really appreciate you taking us into these touchy subjects that we don't talk about, like jealousy, which is generally seen as bad, right? We don't want to be jealous, and it's such a universal experience. We all feel jealous in some capacity, whether in a relationship or in work or between friends, and that also something that's relatable in terms of one of the biggest episodes I had next after I got off Prozac and after I left medicine and after I moved here was through a breakup that involved like jealousy on both ends and just involved a situation gone wrong. And there was a lot of there's so much pain about that, and again isolation, which seemed to that point to be like my de facto way to just like go into my cave until I can figure this out, and then when I figure it out, I'll be ready to go back out into society with a big smile on my face, and that is in many ways like the experience that actually brought me to this moment where I was trying to figure out like what is this masculinity thing and why do I have these feelings, and that's what got me into Carl Jung and depth psychology and just made me want to understand what like psychology is and how our brain is wired, and also took me then at that point to psychedelics, which is a different substance, we can call it chemical, molecule, medicine, however you want to call it. But to me, it's like there is. I like how you said that we're always looking for the silver bullet. Like you're gonna take Zoloft and you're gonna be good. You're gonna meditate and then you're gonna be good. You're gonna do ayahuasca and then you're gonna be good. And there is no one coping mechanism, right? And I think that's a big thing that we, when we were sharing notes, was really interesting that we both coped with depression in very different ways, and continue to find like different coping mechanisms as we grow older and as we are challenged by life in different ways. And I think, the what we're seeing with psychedelics and how it taps into these deeper parts that we don't necessarily want to see, can be, in some ways, I found that more helpful than Prozac, which made me feel nothing. Like I wasn't feeling bad anymore, but I wasn't feeling good. I just wasn't feeling. And that was not how I wanted to live my life either. And then, like, I remember my first MDMA experience, which was like, whoa, like my brain can do that. I can go from like really anxious to really happy and very open in a matter of seconds. And I have a friend who very unusually decided that he's going to try MDMA once, and he's only done it once. And once he saw that his brain can do that, he was like, I want to learn how to make that happen without any substances, which I thought was really cool. That was not my story with MDMA, but I wish I could be as strong. But it's incredible that we can go into like these mental states, and some people definitely need medications. What is your take on, especially like psych meds now, especially as a psych nurse? And how do you? I'm sure you see some people that really need medications. Like it's almost like really privileged for us to sit here and be like, yeah, I did Zoloft or Prozac and I don't need it anymore. I'm sure you see some really complicated patients.
I think psych meds is a big group of medications, right? We have a lot of different types, and lots of different types of people that need different types of things, right? So for me, I needed something to sort of take the edge off so I could address some situations and then, or the ways I was thinking about some things in the get back. In an inpatient psych facility, we have people that are depressed. We also have people that have, let's say, schizophrenia or bipolar, like really significant bipolar disorder with psychotic features. Patients with people, if you will, with situations like that are probably going to need to take meds for a longer period of time, if probably not, or probably forever, right? Because their brain just doesn't have the appropriate chemistry to help them function in daily life. Someone that falls into a depression spell may not need to take something forever, right? It can sort of depend, I think, on whether or not you're having just a straight chemical imbalance, some sort of organic issue, or whether or not it's situational. So anybody that goes through a divorce, anybody that loses a close family member, they're going to feel depressed, right? And so sometimes a situation like that, you probably can take it for a little while. You wouldn't want to take it just on a day-to-day, like every once in a while sort of thing. You want to take it for a period of time because it does take time to build up into your system to have its effect. Especially antidepressants take a couple of weeks. I like what you said about psychedelics. I think sometimes drugs and meds are really separated out as two very significantly different things. For me, I think they're actually a lot more similar, right? They come from similar places. We make most drugs, even in our labs and stuff, we make them from natural components initially. And so I think one of the things about taking psychedelics or MDMA or things like that is it shows you that your brain, with very small changes in chemistry, can have very different experiences. You see this in the psych hospital as well. I'll give somebody an antipsychotic. They're super aggressive, off the wall, attacking other people or themselves. You give them these medications and then they're sort of normal, like very quickly within an hour, let's say. And it really shows you how much your brain and all of your experience is really a chemical thing. And so I think just noticing that helps us be, for me, I certainly have had this experience, helps me be a little more skeptical of the internal conversation I'm having. So when I have a negative thought, I'm like, yeah, but is that real, or is that my brain chemistry being a little bit off? And so it helps me step back a little bit and be more objective. And I've experienced that with patients as well, with other people that have taken psychedelics also.
Yeah, and it's nothing short of miraculous. I think one of the things we do is try to attack big pharma or say like that, discount it, but it's also like really useful. As someone with a medical background, I've seen it and know that there's a lot of goodness that people find using these, but it's also not called for in all the ways that it's prescribed. So I love how balanced this conversation is, rather than trying to make an enemy of something. And one other coping mechanism that I know is very important to you, and I want to kind of also generalize it, but when we were talking and you were kind of like in the thick of it, you were telling me that if you had this notion that if you went and exercised and if you went to the gym that day when you were like experiencing a really challenging time, then you can do it any day. So how's exercise been a part of your own coping mechanism and kind of your internal resourcing?
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, we of course hear all the time that exercise is good for happiness and all of that. And we do have real physical effects. So when you exercise, you release, your body releases endorphins, right? All of these feel good chemicals. So you just have a physical response that causes you to feel better. But I think in addition to that, there's also other parts to it. When you go and you take care of yourself, you feel good about that action. You feel good about yourself. You feel confident. You feel like, you're doing what you need to do. Whereas if you're feeling depressed and you're just laying on the couch, maybe it's hard to get up off the couch because, you're tired and not really feeling like doing anything. But you also then have this sort of internal conversation that's saying, you should have got off the couch today. And so just getting out and doing anything, even if it's a short workout, maybe just getting out and taking a 5-10 minute walk, gives you a little bit of that. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm doing what I need to do to get better. And that can be very motivating, sort of create a virtuous cycle. For me, that is one of my primary coping skills. Anytime at this point, I know a lot of the things that get me depressed. I notice those feelings very quickly when they come up. And I know that going and getting my exercise and working out and feeling good about my physical body and things like that helps me feel a lot better. So as soon as I start feeling those depression feelings, I get my ass to the gym because I know that's what's going to help me. Can be different for different people, of course.
Yeah. So and you're a pretty fit guy. Like the gym is a big part of your lifestyle and something that you really enjoy. But I also kind of want to talk about how exercise, this idea of it changing our chemical balance, does not need to be an intense workout, right? It does not need to be even HIIT or cardio or running. It could be simply a walk in the sunshine, right?
Yeah, I think it, a lot of times if you get on YouTube and you start watching videos about how to become fit, or these huge exercises, there's a million different exercises you have to learn. You got to go for 2 hours. You got to really drive hard. No, that's total nonsense. If you want to do that, it's great. I love being in the gym and taking my time, but it's definitely not necessary. If you aren't really working out much and you go and you just do one workout a week for just a few minutes, that's an improvement. And any improvement starts to adjust your body. So it doesn't have to be some huge, crazy thing, right? Just getting up and doing just a little bit is very effective.
Especially when it comes to mental health, right?
Yes.
If we're thinking longevity and all the mania around it, or at least in terms of heart health, or if you're trying to get one of these goals, maybe you need more intense exercise. But as far as your mood, a walk goes a very long way, especially if it's a walk with a friend you like, right?
Yeah. yeah, back to those connections, right? Those
Yes.
relationships really make a big difference.
Yes, with dogs too. I've been experimenting a lot with that.
Yes.
It works. So I want to close off this segment by, well, one of the other things that comes to mind is meditation, which we did today, right? And this specific Welcome to the Party meditation was a huge thing for you. I think I just experienced a Vipassana 10-day retreat, which was the most intense meditation experience. And what I realized was that meditation is not about ending stress or killing stress. It's actually about experiencing the stress and welcoming it to the party and being like, oh, okay, here you are and here I am. And I'm not going anywhere and I'm here to get to know you. So I think meditation can be also kind of commercialized and bastardized in a way that it's also an end-all be-all thing. But there's so many formats and so many things. I'm curious to know, have you experimented with meditation? What is your relationship with it?
Yeah, more in the last couple of years than before, for sure. I think in the past, I maybe didn't understand it as well. And so there's some of you may have heard of the Calm app. I really am a big fan of
What
the
is
Calm.
that?
It's a meditation app. You can download Calm, yeah. And there was this 30-day meditation thing. And so I did one each day for a while, and it really taught me a lot about kind of the base concepts behind it. And like you said, it's very much about acceptance, welcome to the party. And I think also just about learning about ourselves, right? We're sort of in our normal life, we're just going. Thoughts are just happening to us all the time. We feel like that's us. And so when you sit and meditate, what you're really doing is sitting and observing all of that. And so you're able to sort of step back from it and see these thoughts sort of happening to you instead of, being caught up in like thinking that they're really you. And so learning more about how we tend to react to various things, how much chatter we have in our mind, I think again helps us be more objective when we're trying to address feelings we may not really be liking or thoughts we may not be liking.
I think one thing we agreed on also while discussing this episode is that there is no prescription, whether we're talking about a chemical substance or an exercise routine or meditation.
Yeah.
And we both want to really encourage everyone listening, like here in the room with us or later on, is that you got to find what works for you, right? There's no, even though we're agreeing on a lot of things, we have very different coping mechanisms. And I think that's kind of a point we really want to drive home, is that it's about experimenting and noticing what works. And there's a multitude of things that one can do to help themselves.
Yeah, I think there's a few that are very popular, right? Working out, meditation. There's a few that are kind of all-purpose, right? But there's also going to be personal things that really work for each person. And so, just like you said, I would always encourage everybody to try a whole bunch of different types of coping skills, try a whole bunch of different things, see how they feel. For me, listening to music, dancing, those things shift my mood really significantly. If I put on a great song, I start shuffling and, around my house or something, I feel better even if I was feeling absolutely terrible before. But that's going to be different for different people. Reading is going to be one for some people. Maybe going out and looking at the stars is going to be one for some people. Religious stuff can be really impactful for certain people. They get a lot of comfort from that. So everybody's got to find what works for them. And then really take note of those things so that when they start to feel down, they already know what their prescription is. They can get right back to it.
I love this example of looking at the stars. That's one thing I've been really playing with, especially when I go further into the world of somatics and understand that resilience is really about being in awe of things. And resilience isn't like 20 more reps at the gym. Resilience is looking at the mountains and looking at the sky and being in awe of how beautiful life is. And that's what resilience actually is. And it's really simple, it takes a few seconds.
Absolutely.
And just like there's no comprehensive list, but gratitude is something also that we got to play with, right? Or just add.
Yeah. I mean, that's basically reframing, right? Looking at what we feel positive about instead of the negative. There's always going to be positive and negative. Everything we do, every decision we make is a trade-off.
Yes.
And so we have the choice of whether we want to focus in and pay more attention to the negative side of things, FOMO, if you will, right? Or whether or not we want to look at what we're gaining or what sort of positive frame we can reframe our situation as. So that's a choice. It takes practice for sure. I think the tendency we have as humans is to sort of lean towards the negative and get caught up in that. But we can practice and learn how to focus more on the positive, and gratitude journaling or just gratitude in general is a good way to do that.
Awesome. And I want to shift into kind of the bigger picture of moving forward, how we reframe depression in society, and how we reframe depression for ourselves and for the people that we love and want to help. But I want to segue into that with another break and just give people another chance to breathe.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying this episode so far. A lot of us consume content but find it hard to integrate it back into our daily lives. If you're ready to go beyond listening and actually rebuild your health, join us at The Human Way. It's my step-by-step interactive course to help you recover body and mind after a hard time. Start today and begin your comeback at thehuman-.com/course. I'll see you there.
So even though we talked about a lot of coping mechanisms, I think what we're starting to realize is that there really is no controlling of depression. And one of the things that has really helped me kind of completely shift my perspective is internal family systems, which we talked about, which is this evidence-based psychotherapy model, which after creating a lot of like health programs around habits and very focused on exercise and meditation, I realized that a lot of my program participants had an increased cortisol, and that was because they were really trying to optimize everything, and that was causing a lot of anxiety and a lot of mental health issues that some kind of well-meaning kind of wellness efforts may create. And internal family systems offered me this new window of accepting and welcoming all my different parts of the party, including the depressed part that's trying to tell me something. And one of the parts or the books from that really resonated with me is Care of the Soul from Thomas Moore, who's a psychiatrist. And he wrote this book in, I think, the 70s, and there's been many reiterations. One of the things that really stood out is this concept that the Greeks had about depression being a visit from the god Saturn. And right now we think of someone depressed as, oh, poor guy, he needs our help, or poor girl, she needs some medications. But they thought a god was visiting you, which is really cool. And it's like, you know, you're hanging out with Saturn for a bit, and Saturn has some things to teach you, and then he'll let you go. And that kind of really resonated with this idea of welcome to the party, right? So let's talk a little bit about how you approach depression right now, having been through it so many times, and what makes you able to sit and prepare for a podcast like this, even when you're in the thick of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely going through it a lot. I've learned a lot about how my body reacts to it, how my mind reacts to it, all of that. We've talked quite a bit about reframing things as well. So sometimes I'm more or less successful, right? Like I get depressed, I struggle through it, whether I have good coping skills or not, just like anybody else. And so one of the things I try to do is, give it a somewhat positive spin, kind of like the visiting of Saturn, right? So for me in particular, I'm a psych professional. I take care of patients that are having really severe depression or psychosis. So it's not just, coming in for an outpatient. They literally get put on involuntary hold because they're, a danger to themselves, danger to other people, or unable to care for themselves. And so one of the positive things about having depression myself is that all of the coping skills that I've learned, all of the tips I've learned that work for me, I can help share those things with the people I work for. Or work with, right, and take care of. And vice versa, every tip that I learn while working with them, I can sort of apply back to myself. So I have this sort of virtuous cycle that gives me some purpose and meaning, and also helps me, take care of myself more effectively. So reframing in that way can be really helpful.
Another thing that really stuck with me, and it's on one of the poems in the cards, It's by this poet Khalil Gibran, and he talks about joy and sorrow, and he talks about how we can only experience so much joy if we're able to experience so much sorrow. And I think we live in like trigger happy, or like happiness is such a value in society right now. We expect happiness, and especially it's linked to consumerism. And the more we have, the happier we are, which is quite frequently false, almost inversely proportional sometimes. Because like the more you have, the more you have to lose. And the idea of experiencing sadness as a part of your well-being, like welcoming it to the party, is something that I think we need in dire need of talking about, because we're so averse to sadness, like no sadness. And I'm curious to know if you're like, finding that the more you experience and allow sadness, that are you finding yourself happier or?
Yeah, I think the struggle back against sadness is something I can relate to a lot, right? I've struggled with that struggle quite often in my life. I think I tend to come at things from a kind of scientific perspective, and one of the things that we have going on in our bodies is our bodies want to they want to have homeostasis, right? So if we have really serious, let's say we take a bunch of Molly, right? You have this really, really high feeling. Well, you rebound on the other side, right? And if you're always just moving up and up and up, you're getting more and more and more. Well, you're always just setting a new normal, right? If you win the lottery, you might feel good for a little bit, but then that's your new normal, and our mind just adjusts to it, and then you have a long way to fall, like you said. So I think reminding ourselves of that when we feel down, that to feel the highs, you really have to feel the lows too. You can't just feel high all the time. It's literally like a physical impossibility of your mind, because your mind is going to have that pain-pleasure balance, and there's really nothing you can do about it. So, invite in Saturn when it comes in, really, take that sadness and know that that's going to mean that you can feel positive, more positive in the future.
Yeah, and when I look back to the past and think of my very first depression, it was a visitor that's coming, knocking on my door really loudly and telling me this life is not working out for you, man. Like, you got to change something. And I was so resistant to it because my immediate response was that there's something wrong with me, rather than this is a change. This is a new chapter in my life. And how you were talking about also the plateau with something like MDMA or any substance really also reminds me of dopamine. At the risk of nerding more on chemistry, but like the idea of dopamine being up and down, going up and down in a wave form that makes us addicted to it. And there's a lot of conversation now about how we're all chasing more dopamine hits. And when it comes to habits, that's also something that is relatable, because when we start, we're using a lot of motivation and a lot of the dopamine, and we expect it to just keep going and going and going, but it has to crash at some point. So it's really easy to start a project, but not easy to continue doing it for a very long time. And that's also why cold showers work, because it lowers your threshold. So any kind of painful experience, it's kind of like cliche, but what doesn't kill you, right? It makes you happier. And I believe that in the long term, that's kind of where we can maybe reframe pain versus being averse to it in society. And I love what you said about how your story was like you needed your dad in the beginning to help you. And then you started realizing how to kind of, it was like a video montage. You're just learning how to work through it and like figure out ways and, falling and getting back on. And now you're in a position where you can actually help others, which is an antidepressant in itself. So it's also for your own benefit. And that's like kind of what I'm finding more and more, that health is really about compassion, and health and compassion are very closely intertwined, both self-compassion and compassion for others. And I'm curious to know, like, how do you see that playing out in society now, and your role in it?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it's definitely felt very positive for me being able to help the patients that I help. Right. I think, in personal relationships, let's say even, the friends that we have in this room right here, it's a very positive thing to be able to be there for somebody when they're struggling. And I think a lot of times we try to show up as just being happy and not be really honest about what's going on inside. And one thing I try to remind myself of is that doesn't just keep me isolated, that sort of robs the other person of the opportunity to support. And, if you think to the last time that you sat with a friend and really helped them through something, like you probably felt very positive also about being able to be with them. And that relationship certainly had positive effects from that. So you're building those relationships, which all the way back to the beginning is one of the main things that gets us through tough times, right? So if you were there for that person, now likely they'll be able to be there for you the next time you're struggling as well. And so, again, another virtuous cycle that we can look at where, every time we support somebody, we build those relationships up. And if we can really expand that, I think it would be really good for society as a whole. We just keep stuff inside way too much. And I think being transparent and open, I see society changing more and more that way. And I'm very pleased about that.
Yeah, same here. There's definitely like kind of a compassion renaissance, I think, that's happening. And it's not a new concept. Like if we go back to all the Eastern religions, like all like, Buddhism or Tibetan, or any kind of like really like the core of any religion was about compassion towards others, and compassion being such a high value. But we're not just in an individualistic society, but we also like want to tough it up. And I think there's also, it's important to make maybe the distinction between compassion and empathy. And there's a lot of research around how they're different. Like empathy is when you feel someone else's emotions, and that can drain you. Like you only have a certain capacity, but compassion actually charges you up, and there's a huge difference. And so it's infinite and it's beautiful. And there, I'm curious to like kind of hear both your role now as someone who's gone through all of these experiences with your patients as a psych nurse, and as someone who is head of a department that's like, there's a lot of other psych nurses that are probably going through similar experiences, but also as like just a human, as a person that's showing up for your partner and your friends and your family.
Yeah. I'm just talking from a professional perspective first. I think when you first get into psych, I've been doing psych nursing for 15 years, and when you first get into it, like you said, it is more draining maybe at that time. It's difficult to deal with patients that are really, really aggressive or just extremely sad. Your job is to keep them from killing themselves most of the time, right? So it can be very, very challenging. You have patients that are manic and really intense in your face, and that can be super draining. As you go through it more and more, you kind of build up some defense against that, and learn how to reframe and focus more on the positive things that, you also get better at helping people. You get better at calming them down, de-escalating them. And I know from my perspective, there's really not much that makes me feel better than going into a situation where someone is very upset, and finding the trigger that's going to pull them out of it. Because it feels like a puzzle. It's almost like a game sometimes. And finding that and helping them get out of it without having to, let's say, restrain them or force meds or something. Sometimes I'll be in tears on the way home because I just feel so excited about being able to do that. And from a personal perspective, of course, always great to be there for your friends. I've needed that plenty over the years. And so, helps to be able to give back in that regard. When, you do things like psychedelics or go and party, there's also going to be a lot of situations where somebody's having a rough time. Let's say maybe they're having a bad trip. And so it's always been something I'm proud of, to like be able to step in and help somebody who's in that situation. And I think mostly it's just helping them feel like, hey, this is okay. You're going to be fine. Almost just a lot of reassurance, because I think the negative thoughts often catastrophize what's really going on. And so somebody being there to just reassure and say, hey, just hang on, it's going to get better, can make a really huge difference.
It's awesome. Is there anything else that you want to share with us today that I didn't ask you?
Nothing that I can think of. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I've really enjoyed prepping with you ahead of time, and all the conversations we've had, that weren't officially prep for this. So I just really appreciate you having me on. And
Same here. Thank you so much for being so open and sharing with us your journey, and sharing things that normally are very stigmatized. So that allows us all to talk more about these topics that you opened up with us. And I think I want to close on this this prompt that we closed the last prep session on, which was about how you said like we go about asking people, how are you? And our natural answer is usually great.
Right.
With a big smile, regardless of what's happening. But you suggested we ask a different question.
Yeah, I think, this isn't obviously appropriate in every scenario, but I would encourage people to, instead of, asking the kind of general question, to ask something like, hey, what are you struggling with? Or is there anything I can do to support you? And I think that allows people to be more open. They may want to be open, but just worry that you don't want to hear it. And so asking that question really connects people, I think, and encourages what we want, which is more openness and transparency and support for one another.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This episode specifically means a lot to me because I was able to share some very formative experiences for me as well. So it means a lot, and I'm sure a lot of people that are watching us or hearing us can relate to you. So thanks for allowing us to all heal with you.
Thank you.
Up next on the Human Recovery Lab.
When you're marginalized, it actually gives you perspective that people in the center don't necessarily have. It means that you can see things other people don't see, which means then you have space for innovation. I hold people accountable to their own dreams. People sell out in their dreams so quickly, right? I know I've done it. What do you want to tell your grandkids about what you did during this moment in history? That's all. Do you want to be someone who says that I'm a contribution to the world? Or do you want to tell them I just minded my business and collected a paycheck? It's set up for that. So that I can't do anything. I'm just going to let whatever happens to me happens to me. And so the experience is that you're constantly in this kind of internal turmoil. And the thing is that if you don't have yourself anchored in your own history and you don't have your community around you to reflect you for who you are and who you know yourself to be, you go into those corporate spaces and then you just get eviscerated. And so people just get burned out. And then you wonder, why is that person acting like that? Or what's going on with them? Right, they're fighting for their humanity.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I'm your host, Omar Shaker. The music you heard was composed live by Vulcan Aaron. Huge shout out to Omar Adib and Mustafa Lazabi, our audio team, as well as Daniel Kaheka and Apricot, our video editors, Veronica Fields for her support in the studio, and Mark Wagenseal on percussion. Follow the Human Recovery Lab on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, and get our latest updates on thehumanrecoverylab.com.